I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Oconee County Planning Commission. This is September the 8th, 5 p.m. Our first order of business is invocation. Mr. Nix, if you would, sir.
Yes, sir. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask that you please watch over this committee and the planning staff and guide us to wise and safety-conscious decisions in support of the public. We also ask that you watch over the county law enforcement, first responders, and other county workers as they perform their duties, that they may return home safely to their families after every shift. And we ask that you please watch over the county and state leaders as they work to make the county and state a better place to live each day. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Ms. Spicer, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, everybody's looked at the minutes from the October 15th meeting. I hear a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
We have a motion, and a second. Any corrections, changes, or anything to the minutes? If not, I call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Guess I'm not going to vote, I wasn't here.
All right, since there's no one here in the audience, we'll skip the public comment, staff comment, well, commission comment, excuse me. Anyone on commission have any comments to make? I would like to make one. I would like to welcome our new member to the commission, Ms. Teresa Spicer.
Thank you.
Congratulations, you have stepped into it. We welcome you here and, can't wait to hear your input on all our conversations.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have something to say. Can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, just want to say a word about Mike Smith and Teresa Spicer. I hold the utmost respect for Mr. Smith. I really enjoyed working with him. I know I'm going to really miss working with him. It'll help us to do things right and to be responsible for our duties as we hold on the commission. I'd like to welcome his successor for District 1, Mrs. Teresa Spicer. And then I have another comment, is our recommended ordinance that went up to the county council on standards. It was 2021-19. It didn't make it past first reading. In my mind, it's because of restrictions to businesses on providing for buffering and screening. However, I believe that the county council would look favorably on lighting standards. Therefore, I'm supporting the PC revisit the 2021-19 ordinance and determine proper wording to restrict uplighting and other lighting annoyances and safety concerns to protect our community from too much inappropriate lighting and during hours of darkness. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Anyone else? All right, now staff comments.
Great. So I have one of the things y'all requested previously, which was a map showing the location of the major subdivisions that have not yet been approved but are in the approval process. So that was included in your backup and should be on your screen now. So this is just the ones that have not been approved yet. There is a subdivision map that's already in GIS that you can pull up for approved subdivisions that exist. So these will be included in that eventually. So this is a static map, it's not an interactive map, and we're still looking at how we want to incorporate that into some of the maps we have and updating kind of timelines and how often it would be updated.
This only includes one. This only includes one subdivision on Mountain View Road. The other one hasn't done anything yet.
Sorry.
Mr. Coley, Subdivision number 1 on this list,
Yes.
when I looked at these subdivisions, it looks to me like all of them fall near or on sewer, except for subdivision number 1. Is that true? How are they gonna put 70 units on an area that doesn't have sewer service?
So of these, 6, 7, and 8 are definitely on sewer. 1 will likely be on sewer.
I didn't think there was a sewer line that ran to that particular location. Looking at the,
Now, some
Sewer
of these
authority
could be
map.
installing their own lines to connect. That is something that's available to them, is to run private sewer and have the sewer authority accept it. Four and 9 are sewer. 3, I'm not sure, I'd have to look at,
it should be on sewer
yeah.
coming from Walhalla.
If it's okay with y'all, I would like to go back to commissioner comments. I forgot something to do. Like Mr. Golden said, Mr. Smith, had to resign due to personal reasons, I guess. I felt as chairman, the job that he did as a commissioner, he did an exceptional job. He did great work for his district and everyone else. I'd like to read this and get approval from the commission to send this letter of appreciation to Mr. Smith. It says, Mr. Smith, the Oconee County Planning Commission would like to recognize and thank you for your contributions as a member. The citizens of District 1 were well served by your dedication and willingness to study, plan, and review and recommend policies. All the commissioners have signed it. I'd like to get a motion, my motion would be to approve this and to have staff send this to Mr. Smith. So, my motion is to approve this letter to Mike Smith.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous?
All right, James, if you will, get Mr. Bassey to sign this when we can and get this mailed out to Mr. Smith. Okay. Discussion of planning commission involvement in land use and subdivision approval process. Mr. Root,
Mr. Pearson.
I'll let you take over and tell us what we should or should not do.
Should or should not, or can or cannot?
Either way it works.
I'll tell you what you can and cannot do. Mr. Pearson brought this question to my attention, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, to see what involvement, what level of involvement, what nature of involvement the planning commission could have in subdivision, plat review, land use, plan review. The global answer is every bit of involvement that you want, really. The way that the Oconee County Code of Ordinances has been drafted, pretty much all of those decisions have been devolved to the planning director as designated staff. Under the South Carolina Code, the planning commission is the entity that is essentially the first tier entity to review plats and plans and approve them. And it says or designated staff. Oconee County has taken the designated staff route. Additionally, planning commission, and this is the case in Oconee County, has direct involvement on appeals from staff decision. So you'll have essentially 3 types of planning commission involvement throughout the state, similar to Oconee County, where the planning commission is only involved in appeals from staff action. You'll have planning commission involvement at ground level for plat approval. or you'll have planning commission involvement for certain, just say more large developments or complex developments. You'll have kind of a cutoff line, right? This is where staff, it becomes more than an administrative process. So we're gonna have a deliberative body like you all jump in. So there's a cutoff line. So anywhere from no involvement essentially except for appeals to involvement on all of the plats that are submitted, usually with small jurisdictions or something like this. And then other jurisdictions, a lot of them are this way. You get plats that are defined within the code, a certain level of complexity, certain size. Those will go to the planning commission as a first route. So that's what can happen. I will say, similar to what I said when we were talking about the sidewalk ordinances before, you know, my job, one aspect is to keep the county out of litigation. So I wasn't, I'm not gonna say I'm in favor of sidewalks or no sidewalks. Ms. Spicer's, I'll say many times, I don't do policy. I do not inject myself into right, left, center, any of that. That is for you all to do. What I do is when called upon by a majority or as appropriate by an individual within, a policy-making decision, I will give the legal advice, draft the documents, and do all of that to keep us out of litigation in between the ditches, as best I can. So, going to the should and kind of veering on that line, planning commissions, just think of it, kind of rephrase it this way. If you're looking at the number one vote getter for litigation against counties or municipalities, it's usually against planning commissions for some abuse of discretion and a subdivision plat review. Now, there are some other things that are kind of frequent flyers, but during the course of my last couple of decades, those are the ones that I see that pop up most often. So speaking as the county attorney who wants to keep us out of litigation, I would say, yeah, don't. Don't push this ball. But pushing that ball, if you want to get involved, is up to you all to do. If you want to get involved from ground zero and be involved in all the plan review, you can do that. You have to make that motion here, discuss it, see what level of involvement that you want. And then, obviously, the county council is going to have to direct me to draft the ordinances. It'll essentially be a full, redoing of both Title 38 and 32 to a degree to get us as the planning commissions involved. And it can be at different levels. So that's where you stand. The simple answer to your initial question was, yeah, you can be involved and can be a decision maker and it can be at different levels or it can stay as it is. And just the only kind of last point to that, for those jurisdictions that maybe it makes more sense, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but to have the planning commission involved, usually they will have standards that have to be applied, and it's not necessarily that there's some sort of discretion that needs to be applied to the application of those standards, but it makes sense to have, similar to the BZA, it applies standards for special exceptions and variances to a given set of facts. For plat reviews, you may have standards in some jurisdiction and you need the planning commission to apply those standards. In Oconee County, for the most part, we have the control-free district. That's certainly the most ubiquitous, covering 90%, some over 80, some large percentage of the county. So there's not a whole lot of discretion that needs to be applied. It's really does the subdivision meet the kind of bare bone requirements of the ordinance, and Mr. Cooley, I think for the most part, makes sure it does, and it's very ministerial. He signs off on it and it's done. So that's what we have here. That's a little bit different than a lot of jurisdictions where you have heavy planning commission involvement. So, 2 cents.
I have a question. Mr. Root, for counties where the planning commission is very involved in the approval process, who is the appeals entity for that organization?
And it goes straight to, just as if, so in our situation, someone's unhappy with a decision James makes, they appeal it to you all, and I don't think that's even happened in the 7 years I've been here, but Frankie, but so, I don't think it has. But if it appealed to you all and they weren't satisfied with your decision, then it goes to circuit court.
So
Similarly, if it just goes to you as first resort, the appeal is straight to circuit court.
then it goes to circuit court. There's not an in-between for that entity for relief.
Correct.
I hate to remove that. I hate for somebody to have to go and pay to go straight to court personally. But second question is it sounded like you had kind of answered, is if the lawsuits occur when the planning commission is involved in judgment calls as opposed to interpretation of what's in black and white. So we need to have a thorough understanding of the black and white and make sure we've got, as this commission, everything we want in black and white under those control standards before we start making judgments about what somebody can or can't do. Because really all we're doing is saying, is this applying properly to what the intent of that piece is? And it's almost as if staff could do that step. But I do think we need to be involved. It's embarrassing to go out into the public and somebody go, oh, what's going on down there? And you go, I don't know. As opposed to being more intimately familiar with what's going on. So I think that we do need to be kept abreast like we are of what's going on. I also think that we need to be informed of areas where there are gaps in the standard. So if there's a standard that somebody's having a hardship over, that the public is calling for this to happen, but we've got a blockade in the way, then we should be made aware of those so that we can correct those standards. Sidewalks. Developer where they need sidewalks to get around, either ADA regulation or whatever, and we say you can't, we would need to be aware of, hey, we need to address those standards. As opposed to simply making judgments of, yeah, go for it, no, don't, things like that.
That would bring up, essentially a fourth option, not within the South Carolina code or our code. It could be written into our code or even a policy for the planning department, and I'm trying to put extra work on James, but this is extra work on you if they went this way, would be to involve you all more intimately with certain types of submissions. Not that you're arbiters, decision makers, but that he's receiving some sort of input from you all, or at least there's an exchange of information so you're kept up to date. It looks like you're migrating that way now, so you're a little bit more abreast of what's going on. It's difficult because, with the amount of activity that James's office sees, he has to have some sort of nimbleness to keep pace. But, it's like you say, you don't want to be uninformed about what's going on. I mean, that's your job to be that ambassador with the public and represent their interests and bring it to bear, both administratively and statutorily. So we could work out something along those lines. Yes, ma'am.
If we're involved in this approval process, is there a turnaround time that we're subjected to? It has to be done in a week and
It's not that quick.
Or
I want
whatever.
to say it's 30 days. They're about 30 days. They're certain it's 30 days. But yes, there's absolutely a turnaround time.
One of the reasons I brought this up is I feel that we need to be more involved, not necessarily in the denial or that, but in the review, just to look at it and know what is going on in order for us to make decisions. We need some type of regulations that we don't have. And that's some of our discussion now, but it gives us a better opportunity to look at these things and be an advisory, basically an advisory committee to staff and say, hey, you might want to look at this before you approve it, or that maybe they didn't see it. It's more eyes on the plats than the two, maybe three in the planning department that approves these things. We'll have 7 more eyes on it, and we may see things that staff doesn't see, then we can point them and say, look at this and see what can be done or whatever with that. That was one of my purposes for bringing this to everyone's attention.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, because it bears on that, and the question is more generous, it's 60 days. So 60 days is the turnaround time, which would allow for, obviously they want James to turn around on it in 5 days, the applicants usually, but 60 days is the outside. Now, it can be extended by mutual agreement. How many folks who are submitting for subdivision approval want to agree to for for the
So is it a
government to
normal
take
vote
longer.
then? It comes to us for a normal vote, yes or no?
Well,
Majority
it's essentially
wins?
done by a hearing, and you're sitting in more of a quasi-judicial kind of capacity, similar to the BZA. So you'd be presented, but yes, y'all cannot act apart from an open meeting and apart from a vote.
And then are we acting on what's written in our standards, or are we acting on opinion?
Lord willing, you are acting on what's written in our standards and not on an opinion. So that, there is going to be situations, I don't think we just don't have that level of sophistication with what we have, and I'm not advocating for it, but that level of sophistication with what we have in the land use standards, that it's gonna take a lot of opinion to apply them. They're pretty straightforward. So, but as they develop and as the county grows, there will be those times where, I don't want to say opinion because that people will think, that was their opinion here and their opinion's different here, so you have equal protection concerns. That's the main thing. You treated this party one way, you treated this party the same way or a different way in the same set of circumstances, but generally it's deliberation and it's applying the standards to the set of facts. And yes, that's kind of an opinion, but it should be more of, like I say, a quasi-judicial thing, just like a judge would do. A judge doesn't derive on his opinion. It's supposed to be, this is the way I see the facts.
The reason I asked that, you brought the BZA. The BZA, a lot of times we see public outcry and public concern and things like that as being influential in the decision. And it sounds like what you're saying is this board should not take that on because that's where the counties get sued. As far as taking on the public outcry, we should be hearing that and putting it in black and white as a standard, as opposed to in a hearing of sorts.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So you're essentially, you get that public outcry on the front end, and then you tailor your standards to meet that public outcry, so you're not responding to the public outcry during the approval process and your decision goes awry, is what you're saying. So, yes, that makes good sense. And I'm not advocating that you all shy away from this. If this is something you want to do and council wants you all to do it, then so be it. I'm just saying, from my point of view, litigation averse, then it's better that you didn't get involved.
The reason I took us through that loop is a lot of times the public doesn't understand what the process is that we're working from. And so there is public opinion, and then all of a sudden we make a decision that's not in line with what the public is doing, and now all of a sudden the public doesn't feel like that they're being heard by our committee because they're not, we're looking at something else through a different lens than what they're seeing happening. And I think that we're putting ourselves in a very strange position. I think we should be hearing those things on the front end and say, we're discussing policy about, let's come talk about those things, rather than being a judgment board.
Dave?
So, for my training, my understanding was we are an advisory committee. We're not a quasi-judicial board like the BZA. So, if we want to discuss particular developments, we can discuss them all we want. I mean, we can even add them to the agenda and discuss them. And we can even ask questions and give Mr. Coley questions. We just can't vote or make any judgments
On them.
on said developments.
Because we don't have any rules or ordinances or anything in place that would give us the ability to make those judgments.
That's correct.
I think we need to take those first steps and make sure we're drafting what we think is something that, to the degree that we want to make any changes, that we would then be following. The other questions, let me say one more thing because you may want to address that. The other question is that James is dealing with a subdivision that could be two property owners that want to move a line over a foot, and that is a subdivision of land. At what point are we going to say we want to be involved or not involved? Are we going to say if you're just splitting off a piece of property, then we don't need to be involved? Or if it's 3 properties, or if it's 10 properties, or do we need to set a number that we want to be involved with?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just in response to Mr. Nix's comment, for the most part, I would say 99% of the time I've been here, the Oconee County Planning Commission has sat as an advisory body, sending ideas, sending proposed ordinances to the county council. But it isn't, planning commission is an entity by state law that can sit as an advisory body, as you do here, that can sit as a legislative body that you all have done very limited times where you, I think the first one that comes to mind, perhaps one of the only ones, is with the comprehensive plan. You do a resolution saying, hey, as the planning commission, this is our resolution, this is our determination on the suitability of the comprehensive plan, here's our part, and you send it to county council. So that's almost a legislative act. And even now, you can sit as a quasi judicial body on the appeals that I referenced. So James a decision by his office gets appealed to you all, you're gonna sit as a quasi judicial body in that situation. That's on the books now, and it could happen any day. It just hasn't. James is just doing such a
I
wonderful
have
job.
one more question after you ask.
Hang on 1 minute. Mr. Gallen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
Just one more comment on, somebody asked the question, I think it was you, Mike. How big a subdivision do we want to consider? What scope? I would think we would probably have to decide to agree on something, but, I mean, we agreed to list, on this list provided only the larger subdivisions of like 70 units or greater. I mean, we could put that in the agenda, couldn't we, just to decide if we want to look at individual subdivision plats and discuss them here? We could put that in the agenda by subdivision if we decide that's what we want to do. Now, I'll just say this, you've got almost a dozen here, so that's going to take up a significant amount of time if we discuss each plat. That's going to be other stuff that we don't get to discuss in our limited time here, so we got to think about that too.
I really do think that us being able to, one, be aware, two, be able to discuss if there are gaps or problems in the process that James is having, that we can maybe work on some policy that streamlines those. Again, something in black and white so the developer can follow those black and white things. But I do have another question, because you had mentioned that it would go to a judicial nature, a circuit court. If we were the body that discussed and approved, and therefore the second step is to that judicial body, does that function like a BZA, where if there's a BZA hearing and a BZA makes a vote, the appeal would be to a circuit, but the circuit can only hear the things that were discussed in the meeting. They can't hear other things about that situation.
Unless there's an abuse of discretion, they're generally just making sure that you apply the law correctly. They don't sit and take additional facts.
So we just need to make sure that we have the black and white down and that we're then applying that. So we really need to focus on making sure we've got everything down on our standards first and foremost.
There is counties that planning commissions handle this stuff, but it has to be a certain size. Some of them were as low as 19, some of them were on up 100 or more, were they not?
Yeah,
James, that we looked at?
Right, so you got about 42 options.
But I mean, it was,
I would love to hear about them if they're 5 or 10, but I don't know,
well, we can hear about them regardless, like we do it now with what he did for us
And
here.
we're bringing you the smaller ones too, so you've seen the 25s and the 18s and the 30s and all those as well that have come in since we've changed that standard to all the new subdivision applications that come in that are over 11 is what we bring you.
Okay.
But for us to get involved, maybe of actually looking at plats and maybe discussing plats and things like that, we would need to set a number, say 15 or 19, whatever the standard may be. We would set a number, and it has to be this big before we'll get involved with anything other than just looking at what James brings us and lets us know about. I mean, we can set that because other counties have that as well. And, I mean, planning commissions don't even get involved. Is it Pickens County that has 19?
I could talk.
One of the counties has,
Look at a bunch of them.
they don't get involved until they're like 19 homes gonna be built. And then that's when they get involved. Anything smaller than that, the planning department handles everything. They don't even do anything. So we can discuss that and figure out what size we want to start with. Dave?
But Am I correct in that I heard that we do not have current regulatory infrastructure at the county level for the planning commission to do any kind of structured review of plats, correct?
Oh, okay, so, to make sure I understand your question, the statement I made was most of the county is control free, so there's not a whole lot to apply. Does this meet any kind of particular requirements of this zoning area? Control free has the setbacks and, that's pretty much it. So that's an administrative deal. Do they check all the boxes? And James says yes or no. But then the second level of that, so one is, do you want to add to that, to make it, and this is obviously the whole robust process and the big hot button in the county is, do you want to add to the zoning sophistication in the county and advocate for that such that there's more for the planning commission to do? So I don't know if that's the response to your first question, but as far as, I think I understand your question, no, there's not a whole lot for y'all to apply for 90% of the county. It's control free, so the plat review is pretty ministerial again.
And that's the part that scares me, is that right now, there's not a lot that we actually can do. Yet when we invite that person to come and speak and we're asking them questions, to me, it's going to elicit the citizens of going, well, wait a second, what about this and what about that? And we can't go, well, yeah, what about that? Because we don't have it in writing that they can't do it. And the moment that we do something that says, yeah, you need to do X, Y, Z, and we didn't apply it to the next guy or the guy before that, we're getting sued. And so that's the part that scares me about doing this. I want to hear about it. I want to know. Again, I'm embarrassed when I don't know something that's out there. But I'm scared of putting us in a liable position.
I've been looking at Pickens County. They have a unified development standard ordinance. It is fairly large. This is not all of it. There's a lot more. It would probably be something good for us to look at. We could do something similar to this and just do the one that deals with, at this particular time, we could just do the one that deals with the housing developments. They go mobile home developments. They've got everything in here. And it would give us a guide to look at, and that way we wouldn't have to be rebuilding anything. We've got all the wording and everything we need. We just change it to fit this county rather than Pickens County. So, that would be something to start with. And on our subdivision development standards, we could use information out of this particular document and apply this to it, to just housing developments, not subdivisions, which I don't like that word because like Mike was saying, a subdivision is when somebody moves a property line or takes 5 acres and divides it up into 5 1-acre lots. That's considered a subdivision. So we need to work on the name for one, make it housing development or land management, something that deals with the building of these large subdivision type land housing developments like it's on Mountain Road and like some of these that's built here, the 300 homes. I don't want our county to come up and end up with the traffic situation that Greenville, even Piedmont, Pickens has, even at this point in time. We have enough traffic here, so I'm not wanting to stop any subdivision, but we do need to manage the growth that's happening in the county because it's just going to keep growing. It's not going to stop all of a sudden and go, we're not going to do anymore. They're going to keep doing it. We have a lot of land in this county that can be developed. Some of it is going to be aggravating to develop because of the topography in this county. But it will be, if a developer buys it, he wants to build homes on it, he's going to do it one way or the other. He just needs, at that point, he's a business, and I feel that he should have standards to go by instead of just free will and doing whatever he wants to the land.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, and I understand what you're saying, and I think that goes to Mr. Johnson's point, if the developer's coming in a control-free area and wants to do X, Y, Z, and it's a huge development, and, we want to preserve what Oconee County looks like now, and they come up here, because we put in place planning commission review, and they've checked all the boxes, and there's really no discretion to apply, but you've got, pitchforks and torches out, and like, we don't want this here, and you all go along with that. I mean, that's just, you've stepped into a lawsuit that you're gonna lose. So, it's the cart before the horse thing a little bit. Until you have standards that really have teeth to them to apply, there's not much you can do except for make wrong decisions, really. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I'm just saying, if the review's up here, it's gonna be, we're anti-growth or we're anti-whatever with this particular developer or project, and, they have to all be treated the same, and there's not a whole lot to vary, in most of the land, if that makes sense. I don't want to keep beating on the same drum, but I will, but just because it is, litigation, liability, exposure area.
I would like to see us really nail down some additional development standards. I think there's an appetite in the county for controlled growth, and I think a planning commission, that's their job. Whether we're gonna start calling it zoning, whether we're gonna start calling it standards, I think there are things that our citizens are asking us to put controls on. So I do think that we as a committee need to have those discussions, the hard discussions, about what are we willing to look at. But I think it needs to be in black and white before we set ourselves up to sitting there having a conversation with somebody, because that just scares me to death.
All right, if there's nothing further on that topic, we will go to discussion of subdivision development standards. Does anyone have anything?
Ditto on all the other stuff.
Like I was saying before, Pickens County has this Unified Development Standards Ordinance. It has stuff in it for all kind of off-street parking, sign standards, lot and building standards, buffers, performance standards, project design standards, land development activities, procedures and permits, appeals. A little bit of everything. It's a long document. It would probably pay all the commissioners to maybe look at it or find one. Maybe Greenville's got a better one. Maybe Anderson has a better one. Just to give us a good start on being able to discuss the different things that we're interested in maybe having as policy for the county. As our constituents out in each district have talked, if they've talked to us, we can bring their points in as well. But we need to get something to manage the growth. I don't like the word control, because I don't want to control any of them. I just like to manage it and try to keep our county looking close to what it is. It's not going to stay this way. It's growing. We just need to manage that growth in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And even though the county is control-free, which to me, that's not the best word for that particular classification, because it does have controls. But maybe that one step we need to do is come up with a different name for control-free, which I think many have tried and many have failed so far. But even though it being supposedly control-free, we do need to come up with some standards on housing developments. So,
I was trying to find my book on 32 and 38, and it was at the office, and I was not at the office this afternoon. But we've got pages and pages and pages of certain things already there. But I think that and I need to go back and look, because it's been years since I've looked at it. There are things I think we might be missing based on the way development is being done today that seems objectionable. And the one thing I hear is that they've come in and cut every tree down, and it's a big red mess, and now they're putting houses in there. And that seems to be one that I'm hearing. And I don't know if we have anything that talks about green space, if we have anything that talks about the way development is done today. We called it fast track in a lot of different states, just fast track construction. But the way it used to be done in the town was you'd develop a subdivision, and then a builder would come in, and a different builder would build each home in the subdivision, as opposed to one builder building 200 homes with 3 different designs. And I think that that's what we're hearing is so objectionable, and I'm guessing that that's not currently addressed in our. So maybe that's kind of a first start, is we come up with a list of the things that this is what we're hearing is objectionable, whether that's density, whether that's green space or lack thereof, whether it's affecting traffic because of locations that it's in, whether it's affecting school districts because they're already overtasked, whether it's affecting septic because we can't draw from a particular area and it's overtasking our sewer authority. Maybe we come up with a list that says these are the issues that aren't currently addressed in our standards that maybe we need to talk about as a way to start.
Where are our standards? Is there a certain chapter?
Chapter 32.
And it's 200 pages?
No.
No? How many pages?
25.
Oh, so, easy read.
That's a guess. That's a guess.
Okay.
Where are we on the stormwater process thing? We have enough people? Do we have
I don't
enough?
think we hit,
I mean, are we, stormwater management, are we supposed to be coming up with a plan?
We are in the process of looking at a couple of different things. Mr. Root is looking at portions of that for legality and what we can and can't get into, and I'm looking at some pieces of it as far as making sure we don't conflict with the state in any of their regulations and don't try and supersede them, where we would be able to work on some other stuff. So it is moving forward. That was at council's direction. Mr. Root can probably speak.
is it 85,000 population?
For it to become an MS4, and I think it's less than that, but it's right close.
Okay.
So we're not at the population level, Mr. Pearson, that you're talking about that where it's required, but, and so DHEC has the default jurisdiction for the different acreage. And some folks say, well, DHEC's not gonna be involved at 0 to 2 acres. Well, they do, they're supposed to be involved. It's still kind of a form submittal. I mean, if you're familiar with the process, it's not a whole lot that they do. I mean, they're just like everybody else, they're undermanned, underwomaned, and underpersoned, what have you. And so they can't do as much as their statutory powers allow them to do. But yes, for the area where we're not gonna conflict with state law, council directed me and staff to work on what I think the best way to do it is a menu of options that the county could employ that would be consistent with state law, consistent with our limited amount of jurisdiction in the stormwater area because we're not an MS4, that can be employed. We do have on the books, although it's very vague, I would say in broad, essentially that the planning director can direct folks to take into account, I don't know the exact wording, James, you may have it, but take into account any kind of stormwater situations so that are unbeneficial that DHEC's not looking at. I mean, that's the essence of it. So it's a very broad grant of power as it is now. I think it's so broad that it's too difficult to do anything with. Right. So yes, I was directed by council to do it. I'm looking at the preemption balance. I mean, what can county really do without getting sideways with the state? And James talking with DHEC, and we're going to present that to council. They're the ones who made that request, and I'm sure then it will come here.
So we're getting close to having to have this stormwater plan in the county.
The census was surprisingly didn't get us as close as on a mandatory level as I thought it would be. So I wouldn't say mandatory, but as far as close by, because county council wants to do as much as we can, or at least present them with options. We're close in that regard because I've been push to do that, and I will do that.
What is the threshold? What do we have to meet in order to be required to have a stormwater plan?
And that's what it was, a population threshold, I didn't recall. James, you were-
Density as well.
yeah,
Density?
There's a population and a density requirement, and it can be smaller areas, so subset areas.
So certain areas can have to have it and others not have to have it? Okay. I remember that we had that discussion. Who did we talk to? Was it DHEC we talked to that came and talked to us about that?
I don't know.
Seemed
We
like
have had a DHEC meeting.
Seemed like we had one with them and they were telling us that, like Seneca may, at one point, they may be required to have it, but Westminster may not because of the density of Seneca and everything, population, so. And it wouldn't be a whole county-wide plan. Okay. Does anyone have anything else on?
So just real quick, chapter 32, article 6, and it's 24 pages.
That's the focus, Article 6.
certainly chapter 38 is well worth your time.
And that's for
Study up
residential
on.
development, that's,
Land development,
okay.
subdivision regulation.
You have anything else, Dave? Mr. Garland, you have anything?
No.
Okay, if we don't have anything else on that discussion, let's go down to our favorite one, the commercial junkyard standards.
Chairman, I've got a 6:30 meeting to get to, if I could excuse you.
You shall be excused, sir.
We sure enjoy when you're here.
Yes,
Frequent.
thank you for coming.
As long as y'all keep on the same page with council. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you, sir. Did everyone have a chance to look over the Pickens County junkyard ordinance?
There were definitely some things in there that I thought were really cool and good. Maybe I should use the word good, and some things that seem challenging for us.
So is on the Pickens ordinance is on the right, and the left is what the commission did before I got here, basically?
Yes.
Yes? What did
Yes.
everybody decide?
Which is not written in stone and can be changed if, I mean, the wording or whatever can be changed. It's not written in stone yet, so.
Okay.
Is it just open discussion?
Yeah, well, let's open it, because I don't think we need a motion. We just open it for discussion and
We had defined junkyard. I liked that in the definition of junkyard that Pickens County had, that they added that sentence, which I don't know if it's necessary or not, but that yard sales of 48 hours or duration or left are exempt from this provision. I'd hate for a neighbor to call and go, a junkyard just, that they're selling product in their yard, and all of a sudden, we're running around chasing yard sales. I thought it was interesting that they had it in there. They seem to have a need for it.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Third line where it mentions watercraft as part of a junkyard. According to our solid waste landfill rules, boats are to go there, not to a junkyard. So we should probably take that out.
I think that things like that need to be in there if we're talking about junk, trash is supposed to go to a landfill as well, but it doesn't, and that's why we're putting the ordinance in place.
Well, it says right here, items accepted for disposal, boats without motor fluids and boat docks. And then it says how to dispose of boats and jet skis. Boats and jet skis can be disposed of in the landfill as long as all fluids and motor have been removed. It's the responsibility of the patron to unload the boat and jet ski safely. Asking to use landfill equipment or attaching it is strictly prohibited.
the key word there being can. There are several, what I consider junkyards for boats in Georgia. There's one or two in North Carolina that's specifically just for boats. I mean, they have boats, jet skis, old boats. And what they do is it's basically a salvage, a part sale, just like our junkyard would be. You go down there, and if you need a 1973 light off of a particular boat, you go to that junkyard and look, and if they have one, you buy it. And it's all boats.
There's one on 85 as well
Yeah,
in South
I didn't
Carolina,
think about 85.
between here and Greenville.
But that is considered a boat junkyard. Now, if you're disposing of, getting rid of it to trash, that would be where you would take it. But if
Can't
you're,
take it there,
but
yes.
if you're wanting to sell the parts off of it, you would take it to, and you could take it to any junkyard. I mean, even one that just has cars in it, you could still have a section with boats in there. Go ahead, Dave.
So, point of clarification on his definition, it's for commercial storage, so there's really probably only a handful of, as this is written, only a handful of yards that this would apply to right now, as far as commercial storage of da-da-da. So, I don't know if that helps clarify that or at all.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying, since you've only got a limited scope as far as how this applies, I don't see why we would differentiate between watercraft and other vehicles. I guess that's what I would say, in line with what they're saying, that we have junkyards that have watercraft in them, so, for commercial sales purposes.
Going on down the list, there was, the Pickens County one said every junkyard must be enclosed on all sides by a fence not less than 6 feet high. And we've got so much wooded area here that while that fence is for child safety, what if somebody's sitting on a big, huge land tract and they're backing up to another 1,000 acres of forest land? Are we going to require them to put a 6-foot fence on the back of their property where there may be a river that's preventing people from coming over on that side, or there may be a lake, or there may be a tree grove that's on their property? Are we going to require that fencing like what they're doing in Pickens County? So that was just something that came up of, do we want to say we're accessible or at the discretion of staff? I mean, it may be that they've got an old chicken house barn that blocks part of that view. It's not a fence, but it is a barrier that provides that protection from trespassing or children's access.
If there was a creek behind it, there's still access to that property by walking around where the fence stopped.
Yeah, and that was a bad example, because if it's on water, it's probably not going to happen anyway. But say a chicken house or something like that, you know.
Unless to me, the fence goes up to that point. I think if we're going to require a fence, which I agree with, it needs to be all the way around the property, regardless where the property's sitting. That way, no one can get into that property at any point except through the front gate.
Okay.
They can't come up from the back, cross the creek and come into there unless they come through that front gate. That way we alleviate the possibility of even though it's out in the middle of nowhere, houses being built, a 2- and 3-year-old, 4-year-old kid can disappear in a matter of seconds. And this way, if they come in through that front gate, hopefully
Somebody can see
the
it.
owner or proprietor of that location is going to see them and stop them from getting in there and getting hurt.
Talking about that front gate, and that makes sense. Talking about that front gate, there, item D, which I thought was a little strange for us, is it says access to a junkyard shall not be allowed from minor local streets. I mean, personally, I'd rather have a junkyard on 1,000 acres down a private drive than on a major road, and Pickens says it must be on a major road.
Well, like I said, these are looking at to take out of Pickens and put into ours, or that way we've got all the wording and we don't have to come up with a whole new sentence for a lot of this stuff. That would be one thing that I wouldn't agree with. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but I don't think I would agree with, I'm like you, it needs to be Highway 11. You can't have one within 1,000 feet of Highway 11, no matter. I mean, that's over 3 football fields away from that
Right.
road,
Well, it's a scenic highway.
because it's a scenic highway.
Right.
If we wanted to really restrict them, we could ask council to make every single county road a scenic highway, which they have the authority to do. And the state could make 28 parts of it as scenic highway. Is 130? There's several in the county that nobody really knows other than Highway 11. We have several other highways that are scenic, considered, the state considers a scenic highway. But, I mean, they say you gotta have if you're gonna do a junkyard, it's gotta be 1,000 feet.
Can I just make a comment about the definition?
Yes, you can.
So there's a definition on the books already for salvage yard, junkyard, and recycling. It's seen for Oconee County, and they've put those three things together under one definition. I was just wondering why the commission didn't just accept that definition. You guys spent a long time trying to define it, but there was already one on the books.
I think in doing this, from my understanding, was that we were trying to really nail this down as opposed to what we have done in our county as kind of minimal wording.
Well, I mean, if you don't want to reinvent the wheel, it's in section 38 under definitions. Salvage yard, junkyard, and recycling operations all are.
It just was a definition that wasn't part of an ordinance, and so we were trying to expand that definition.
So if this, my understanding that if the commission's going to amend this existing definition, then it goes over to PED for approval, then up to the council to approve the new definition. Otherwise.
Correct. The whole
So-
ordinance would have to go through council approval.
So it really I guess, is there a good reason to change this existing definition? What is it? Like, tell me.
If we are creating an ordinance, I would say we need to make sure we're creating that ordinance in its thoroughness. If we're
I'm
gonna
just
do
saying,
it.
if you want to start with the definition, what is wrong with the current one? That's all.
It just wasn't as involved.
It's what is involved.
It just was not as involved and detailed.
Is that what you got pulled up there?
No, I was pulling up the,
Oh, I thought you was pulling up.
scenic byways. That's the
You remember what, section
107,
Yep.
Highway 11.
38?
I got it printed out if you want it.
That's what that was. Anyway, you want to
Pardon me, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I'd like to move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
32.
You did not get it. We are still talking.
Okay.
If you need to go, Mr. Garland, you can go ahead. I mean, we still have a quorum, so if you need to go, you got something you have to do, that's not a big deal.
Okay, I'm still here with you. Thank you, sir.
All right.
What was Ms. Spencer, what was your vote? Was it,
I was
What?
voting to stay. Yeah, I was,
Okay.
yeah. Like I'm in the middle of
Where
something.
was that, a definition?
Hold on, Frankie, let me see if I can find this. 3812-2.
Could you pull up that on our
Terms and
screens?
definitions.
Chapter and zoning, and then it goes into definitions.
Area 12?
3812.2, yeah.
Yeah, terms and definitions.
It's under salvage yards.
Is that the
I think
definition?
ours is much more thorough.
Is that the definition come out of that international stuff that the county accepted?
I couldn't tell you where it came from.
So I'd like to make a point on that. So
This was originally adopted in 2012 and amended in 14.
Go
But
ahead,
as
Dave.
far as that definition goes, what bite does it have within this regulation, the zoning portion of this regulation at all?
It applies to the matrix on what is and isn't allowed in a particular zoning.
In a particular zoning, correct? So if you go to that particular zoning matrix for a particular type of zoning, this has bite in that particular zone, and if it's control-free, it has no bite.
So it would
Correct.
say whether or not it's allowed with a special exemption or it's not allowed.
So in control-free, this definition is not applicable, correct? It doesn't apply in the control-free zone.
Right, it's unregulated, or unrestricted use of control.
Right, and so most of what we're trying to regulate with this new definition is in control-free zone.
Being a control-free, more in a control-free than rather in a particular zone.
So here's a question. If you're in a control-free zone, those are the districts, is that what you're talking about? We have 10 districts, right? So if somebody sets up a junkyard, or if a junkyard pops up, does the junkyard now define the district, or find that area as a new district? Because junkyards are allowed in three that I saw: traditional, rural, ag, and industrial. So if somebody sets up a junkyard in control-free, is that person redefining?
There is no
That
restriction
spot?
on use.
There's no restrictions on usage.
So even, but because, you see what I'm saying? Because junkyards is allowed in 3 spots, and he sets it up in a control-free, is he creating a new spot, or is it changing the definition of where he?
By the definition of a control-free, there is no restriction on the.
So nothing
use.
can change
So
it,
A
This-
rezoning can change it.
only zoning.
Having a junkyard there doesn't make it something where a junkyard is explicitly allowed, because there is no limits on what you can do. You could put an industrial waste storage, a junkyard, and a shooting range right there, and a house.
Okay,
Yeah.
just wondering.
Here. Request to speak. Jim, so can you describe the zones that this particular definition applies to?
So we can go to the matrix and look for,
That's not too much trouble.
no, so here's where these 3 that we were discussing prior, so special exemption, special exception, and permitted.
Can you define those letters? What's, P is permitted?
He is permitted, yeah, so.
What's X? No?
X is not allowed.
Then S, what's, oh, there you go. Special exception.
So up at the top,
Industrial, and then agricultural and traditional.
Those 3.
so I'm still trying to learn all this stuff, Jim. So the uses
Yes.
in the zoning use matrix,
Yep.
are those separate from control-free, or can those exist in control-free?
These are separate from control-free. These are the
Control-
zonings that have-
So these are
Control-free is
all
not in the
unique.
Control-free is not listed in the matrix because it is,
So these are a very small percentage of the whole county. Very, very small percentage of these, of anything falls under these different categories.
So, and this was years ago, control-free for whatever reason never made it in the matrix. So control-free is a free-for-all.
I think
None
it
of
ought
which
to be in the
applies.
matrix.
And we talked about putting it in the matrix years ago, and I don't remember what the legal reason was why it didn't make it into the matrix.
I mean, it would just be
It
a
is
column of
as well.
X's, but
Because the way it is in there, you can't go back to control-free. You can go from control-free to any of these zonings classifications, but if you go from control-free to
that's right, that's
agriculture,
right.
you can't go back from
it couldn't-
agriculture. You can go back and forth with these.
It couldn't be in the matrix for that reason.
'Cause you can't
Right
go
now, it
back
sits
to it.
outside the matrix, and if you're in control-free and want to go into one of these categories, then you can appeal to go into one. But if it was in the matrix, then somebody that's in another one could appeal to go into that one.
But I understand, so the matrix is constructed such that you can jump from one of these to the other.
Right.
And we don't want control-free in there because
We don't
you
want.
can't go back to control-free
Right,
once
you
you're
can't
in.
go back to
They
control-free.
didn't want nobody
Right.
going back to control-free
That
if
was
we
the
were in
reason.
something else, is what the
Understand.
original people that made this.
So,
So,
All right,
so back to the definition. Um, Existing definition, is this something the commission can live with or not?
The definition that we've put down here.
No, this one
I
that's
think
already on the
we've
books.
made good headway in creating a definition for the ordinance. I don't know that we should go backwards there necessarily.
Well, and then, I mean, it's just got a two-step process now to get approved and to stick, otherwise
Yeah, it's
it
a
gets.
four-step process right now.
Well, it could get sent back and then, we've got one, so what's wrong with it, I guess?
I just think if we're establishing a new ordinance, we need to make it as detailed as possible.
I would point out, one of the things that you've talked about in your previous meetings is about the auto record yards, which a junkyard includes an auto wrecking yard in this definition.
And that we were keeping them out specifically
Yeah.
because of all the
That's part
public
discussions, and that's just a point.
concern. So we've got to change it anyway.
A towing facility they come get your wrecked car, like if you have a wreck, and they put it on their lot for hopefully a short period of time until the insurance company gets through with
Right.
it. And then the insurance company either comes and gets the car and takes it to a salvage place or a junkyard or whatever, or, sells it to the guy, the tow company, and they take it to the salvage. They don't leave it there. So we left them out of this definition purposely, because they're not a junkyard. They don't sell parts off of cars or parts off of anything or ropes or anything else. They just store the car for a short period of time, and then it's hauled off the lot and got done away with.
Right, but see, that's part of this definition is you can buy, you can sell, exchange, or store. You don't have to only sell to be part of the definition. It's an all-encompassing situation where it covers whatever the car is doing, sitting and waiting to be scrapped, you're storing it, it's being sold, it's being exchanged. That's why it's kind of an all-encompassing definition.
So the last two sentences in the current definition in section 38, a junkyard includes an auto wrecking yard, but does not include uses established entirely within enclosed buildings. So I thought we were excluding auto wrecking yards as far as this type of junkyard regulation. And also then the last sentence, a junkyard for vehicles is defined as 4 or more junk, inoperable, or unlicensed vehicles stored on the property. So if you tried to put this definition, if you tried to apply this definition, it would get a lot of people. And I don't think that was our intent, was to get people with 4 junk cars in their yard, to declare them, to fall under this regulation that we're gonna develop for junkyards.
So I guess, do we change this or go with what you did already, which is, it is a change?
Well, this one is specifically tailored for the zoning. This one is specifically tailored
For the ordinance.
for the ordinance for
Okay.
junkyards that fall within that definition, regardless of what zoning they fall in. It's really zoning independent, so.
Okay.
Other things that were interesting in there, don't know, didn't have an opinion on it, but I thought that it was interesting that 5 feet from a property line of a school, church, cemetery, as opposed to, and that was on an existing one that was expanding. But then it did say no expansion without a permit. So I thought that that was a little lenient on an expansion process. Other than that, there were a lot of things that I don't think applied to us. And not that those did, but there were some things that definitely didn't.
Frankie?
Sir.
Or Chair, sorry. So I think we had a previous discussion of one thing that, it's going to be hard for the commission, for everybody to agree on things, but as far as health and safety, keeping people out, I think the fence thing,
It's important.
I think we could, I think that's, if we're going to start with what we would want to regulate for public health and safety, that's important enough to maybe take precedent even over property rights in this case, because we're protecting lives. A fence is probably a good thing, so. I think there's a few things that we could pick out of this Pickens County regulation, maybe the next meeting, Frankie, if we, put that on the agenda to go through this thing. There's a few things we could agree on and get into this start that we have. And that's probably one of them, in my humble opinion.
Ms. Spicer, you have anything else?
Yeah, there's, I got this from the Greenville junkyard ordinance, I guess, and it regarded, it just brought to mind, there was a junkyard, I guess it had a fire, and I don't know what fire codes any of our junkyards had. There was one back in October of 2020. And so and it just says, all junkyards shall comply with the applicable chapters of the standard fire prevention code and other pertinent requirements. It's pretty basic, but junkyards should be, if we're going towards safety,
That's a good point.
let's do that. There was something else I saw.
Is that Greenville County or the city of Greenville?
I don't know. My notes just say Greenville, sorry.
No. We'll hunt it.
The other thing I saw was, where is it? Bear with me. And this goes in line with council's request for stormwater management, that DHEC for industrial stormwater discharge, it's going to require that junkyards have a NPDE. Do you know that permit? The NPDE permit for junkyards, let's see. And I thought, well, this is a segue from stormwater management to a junkyard ordinance. The junkyard needs to have that permit as well for its stormwater discharge because it's industrial. If I can find it, I can give it to you. Oh, here you go. It's right off the DHEC webpage. Phase 1 stormwater regulations created 11 categories of stormwater discharges associated with industrial activities. And the permit's called the NPDES permit, and this will include metal scrap yards, battery reclaimers, salvage yards, auto junk yards. So that's a good tie-in. Council will like that. Their ordinance. Just mention that.
Got that, James? All right, let's do this. It's 6:20. Everybody write down stuff that you would like out of the Pickens ordinance or the Greenville, wherever you find an actual junkyard ordinance. Write down the things that you liked. We'll bring it, we're gonna have it again on our agenda next meeting. Hopefully at that point, we'll have all members here. We can get other views as well. Because we need to get started on this thing. And I think, Mr. Garland, don't you have the information that Mr. Smith had on the way we should structure this discussion?
The outline.
Yes.
We'll get with you again at next meeting, and maybe you can pass that along to Mr. James, and he can put that in our backup material where we'll have the same information of how this thing should go. That way we'll stay on the same, everybody be on the same page with it.
I'll check with James, see what we can do.
Not that we're great at sending stuff to staff, but as far as homework, maybe instead of us just discussing that, ooh, I like this sentence or I like that sentence, that we actually email those to him so he can make a list. And And then we can go through and say, what do you think about 1? What do you think about 7? What do you think about 8?
Can I make a suggestion?
Don't do that.
Email it to Elise. And we'll just keep a running list.
Yeah, she don't do anything all day anyway, so just email
We'll keep
her.
a
I work
running
very
list.
hard, actually.
We'll get a running list, and if you get it in, let's say, Tuesday before the cutoff, so we'll go back up on Wednesday. So we have time to put it in for the backup to be included. So our next meeting,
That will be, the 20th is our next meeting.
I think it'd be easier for them in doing the minutes. It'd be easier for us to say, I like that, but could we change this one word? Or from and to at, or whatever it might be.
so we're meeting again on the 19th, so that would be Wednesday. We need to get it out, so we can send it to us by, the 13th.
Yep.
So that's a pretty quick turnaround. That's giving you guys 3 days.
Okay. No pressure.
Yeah, we don't usually meet on Thursday, so.
So the 13th.
Yeah.
Got it.
Sure. I would like to recommend that we just have this one thing on the agenda so that we have time to work through it.
Either that, or we take it and put it on the following agenda where we actually have more than 3 days to read through some of those ordinances.
I just want to throw out one. I called Mr. Hernandez today. He's our code enforcement officer, and I just asked him how many open cases he said. He said between 150 and 200. He said whatever we could get done would really help out his life. So I feel like he's in a hurry to get something on the books. Just FYI.
Well, we've been working on a commercial junkyard ordinance for, probably 3 years. It's been mentioned at planning commission.
As far as open cases, I mean,
It's
this
just
may not
general,
even
but-
apply to what, all those cases. In fact, it's
He said it
probably
would
likely
help.
not to.
But it's not all 150, no, but he said it would really help him out.
Well,
He had something.
the thing is, we can't, if we get something, say we had something written up, we send it to council, it's still gonna take them 3 meetings, to get it approved.
I understand.
So we're still looking at October, but we can't, his complaints he has now, he couldn't use this ordinance to
Address.
address the
Understand.
complaints he
It
already
starts the
has.
process,
It,
absolutely.
it has to start
Yeah.
from the time the ordinance is approved, then he couldn't use it for back stuff.
In addition, once we get something done, it's got to go to Mr. Root and go through all the legal rewrite. So I would say as far as
November.
creating a new ordinance, we definitely want to make sure that it's right and not be pushed, under something like that. I'd also encourage, rather than 3 days, if we really want to try to study this, to put it a meeting out so that we can all really, including Alex, who's not here, really get that homework done.
That would put it October 3rd, and that would give you till, September 27th, so that would give you 19 days.
Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
October
It's
3rd?
y'all's is meeting, I'm
October
just,
3rd. It's the first Monday of October,
Got it.
So September 27th on the,
Tuesday.
You okay with that, David?
Well, we need to probably make a motion and
well,
vote.
next meeting is the 3rd,
It's a night.
No, our next meeting is.
in October.
October, first meeting in October is the 3rd.
3rd, okay. All right, let's make that, do we need to make that a motion?
Yes, please. Clean it up.
I make a motion that we postpone the meeting that's on, what date?
Do you
No, no,
want
no.
to keep your meeting
Oh,
and
we're-
not have junkyards on it?
Not on
Do
the
you want
agenda.
to postpone? You can do it either way.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone any further discussion on the commercial junkyard ordinance until the October 3rd meeting.
Perfect.
Second.
and then in the meantime, we do
And
homework
then we
and
do the
submit
homework
ideas
that,
or concerns or
So
otherwise.
these,
Any discussion?
any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, with that said, Mr. Garland, do you have a motion
I'd like to move that we adjourn, sir.
I'll second that. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, sir.